everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I am Brittany Davis, Senior Auditor in the Office of Auditing Services.
Good morning, and I'm Peggy Scott. I'm also a Senior Auditor in the Office of Auditing Services. We're going to now talk about ESSER fiscal monitoring, reviews, and compliance. And we're going to turn off the camera and we will proceed with the presentation. Thank you. First, we're going to talk about the objectives today and what you will learn. One, we're going to talk about internal controls, those written policies and procedures. We're also going to discuss the SCDE guidelines for retaining support documentation and assurances and terms and conditions for federal subawards. Then we're going to discuss expenditure classifications and the required documentation, as well as common issues noted and ways to avoid audit findings. Internal controls, written policies and procedures. 2 CFR 200.303 states the non-federal entity must establish and maintain effective internal control over the federal award that provides reasonable assurance that the non-federal entity is managing the federal award in compliance with federal statutes, regulations, and the terms and conditions of federal awards. To ensure that an entity maintains effective control over and accountability for all funds awarded, the entity should have written policies and procedures.
Hey there, I just wanted to let you know that we're still seeing the first slide of your presentation. I don't know if that was intentional.
No, it's not. Give us 1 second to figure out what's going on.
Of course, of course. If you're using PowerPoint Live, you might be able to just click on the slides as they show up on the bottom of your screen.
Okay, let's try that. Did it switch?
It did not. Is the cursor button hit on that?
Yes. So should we unclick that?
Sure, let's try that.
Okay, try.
And then see if you can use the arrows or the slides and see if that moves it.
Are they moving?
No. If you just want to share your screen instead.
It would be us with the technical issues.
It's okay. It's okay. If you just want to share your screen instead, you can do that.
Did you give her control?
Oh, it's moving. Oh, maybe it's just me. Ignore me entirely because apparently it's working for everyone else.
Oh.
So
Okay.
I'm the
we
goofy
have people in our
one.
office that are saying it's not working for them as well.
Maybe it's an SCDE thing, but
okay.
Yeah, it must be an SCDE thing because all of our guests are saying it's working. So I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Well, sorry for that hang up. We're gonna I guess we'll go back.
I was gonna say it's half and half, so I don't know if you want to try and keep doing PowerPoint Live or share your screen, but it's something.
Yeah, we have someone else in our office who's saying they can't see it. Okay, well, we're gonna stop sharing and then retry again.
Okay.
Yeah, like I'll scroll down. And it should be the one right there.
And if all else fails, Mr. Cobb had a fantastic idea, and we can just click through. I know I didn't see the button that said sync to presenter. That was not shown up on mine, but all right. Oh, we can see your cursor. First one's up, at least on my screen.
Okay. Okay,
There
what
we
happened?
go. Slide
Okay,
forward.
okay. I think we're cooking
Does
with
that look
gas
good
now.
for everyone
so-
else? Everyone else see
Okay.
slide 4? Woo!
Okay,
All
people
right,
are
we
indicating
got
they
at least
can.
one.
Perfect. Sorry, guys. All right.
Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the common issues that we have noted with internal controls, and those actually can include missing written policies and procedures for the following. And I'm not going to read all of the items on the list, but I'm just going to go through a few of them. The first one would be grants accounting, allowability, cash management procedures, including the timing and frequency of requests for grant reimbursements, payroll, including timekeeping and time and effort documentation, emergency pay policy, conflict of interest for those engaged in procuring goods and services, as well as equipment management, including acquisition and disposals. Now we're going to talk about the SCDE guidelines for retaining support documentation. The SCD guidelines for retaining support documentation are the instructions on the documentation required for federal claims submitted to the SCDE for reimbursement. And it's actually broken down by classification of expenditures. The SCDE guidelines for retaining support documentation are usually distributed late summer or early fall to the SCDE program directors who are instructed to share with the district federal program contacts. The SCDE guidelines for retaining support documentation are embedded in the SCDE assurances and terms and conditions, and you can actually access the guidelines using this link on the agency's website. Now we're going to discuss expenditure classifications. As you all are aware, there are 4 major expenditure classifications: salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, and supplies and materials. And we'll talk about each of those a little bit more. With expenditure classifications, you want to make sure that expenditures are charged to the correct function code and the object code. If you determine that expenditures will be incurred for a different purpose than what was approved in your original spending plan, an amendment must be requested and approved prior to charging the expenditure. You also want to ensure that the correct account codes are used to charge the expenditure and it is correctly noted in the budget amendment and revised spending plan. So the fiscal accounting handbook that can actually be accessed at this link for the appropriate year will actually contain additional information that you need to ensure that you're utilizing the correct account codes, function codes, and object codes. Now we're going to talk about salaries. The documentation that is required for salaries would include record of time and effort, which actually includes employee timesheets, personnel activity reports, also known as a PAR, or a semi-annual certification. In addition, we also need to know, or you need to maintain documentation concerning the terms of employment, which would include the full name of the employee, as well as their position and/or job title, a job description with a detailed listing of duties, as well as records of wages and/or salary agreements to support their hourly wages or the annualized salary. Some of the common issues that we've noted with salaries include that employees were paid at the incorrect rate of pay, resulting in underpayment of staff. And as a result, the districts actually issued payments to staff to correct the underpayment issue. Timesheets not being completed for hourly employees, as well as time and effort documents not complete or actually incomplete. And last but not least, emergency pay policy not being present. Emergency pay policies. According to the fact sheet that could actually be found at this link, indicates that if a LEA does not have an existing emergency pay policy, it should create a written policy to put emergency contingencies in place for federal and non-federal similarly situated employees. So that is definitely something that we will look for when we're actually conducting our audit, that you actually have an emergency pay policy. And if you don't have it, then we'll ask that you implement a corrective action plan to develop and devise an emergency pay policy going forward. Time and effort. Employees who work in whole or in part on a federal cost objective must complete time and effort documents. ESSER funds are federal funds. Therefore, employees paid with ESSER funds must maintain time and effort documentation. According to Part D of the SCDE assurances, Part D of the SCDE assurances state that the applicant will also comply with the Office of Management and Budget, also known as OMB, 2 CFR Part 200, Subpart 2, cost principles related to the allowability, reasonableness, and allocability of costs consistent with the approved budget, and also by maintaining required support for salaries and wages. Required support includes certification and/or personnel activity records, also known as PAR, depending upon the time spent on the cost objectives. If an employee is working on a single cost objective, such as working solely on a cost objective for the ESSER grant, a semi-annual certification is required. If an employee is working on multiple cost objectives, such as a cost objective for the ESSER grant and a cost objective for another federal grant or non-federal grant, a personnel activity report or PAR is required. Some frequently asked questions concerning time and effort. One frequently asked question that we receive is, do I need to complete time and effort for an employee bonus paid out of ESSER funds if the employee's regular salary is paid out of non-ESSER funds? The answer to that question is yes. Time and effort is required for an employee whose bonus is paid out of ESSER funds. A blanket certification can be used to list all employees who receive the bonus paid out of ESSER funds. However, justification for the bonus for each employee is required. Another question that we receive a lot is, do I need to complete time and effort for an employee stipend paid out of ESSER funds if the employee's regular salary is paid out of non-ESSER funds? Yes. Time and effort documentation is required for an employee whose stipend is paid out of ESSER funds. Another frequently asked question is, do I need to complete time and effort for an employee who is only paid during the summer out of ESSER funds? The employee's salary during the regular school year was paid out of non-federal funds. The answer to that question is also yes. Time and effort is required for an employee who is only paid out of ESSER funds for the summer. A semi-annual certification can be used to certify just a portion of time that the employee was paid out of the ESSER funds. The specific period of time that the subrecipient is certifying should be included on the certification statement. And we've included some samples of the documentation or the records that are actually required to be maintained for time and effort. On your screen is actually a sample of a PAR that can be used as a timesheet. Now, we realize that some of the visuals are not the best, so if you have questions or if you would like for us to email you samples of these documents, please just either call or send us an email. Our contact information will be included near the end of the presentation, and we'll be happy to send the examples out to you. But on your screen now is actually a PAR as a timesheet. A timesheet may be used, may be a PAR if all of the required elements of a PAR are present on the timesheet. This is also a snippet of a part as a timesheet, and you'll see that it includes like the employee's name, their job title, the pay period, or specific dates, their daily and work week ending, specific times, time in and out, calculation of time worked, daily and work week ending, as well as calculations of other time, sick leave, holiday, etc. And there's also a portion at the bottom certifying that this is accurate. And it also includes a space for the employee's signature and date, as well as their supervisor's signature and date. This is an example of a part only. And again, this includes the employee's name, includes the month and year, employee's name, their position, a space for their signature and date, their supervisor's signature and date, as well as the distribution of the direct time that they worked on the cost objective, as well as indirect time. This is also a snippet of a part, just a better view. And then this is the bottom portion of a par. And again, it shows like the subtotals of the indirect time, and it will also include the grand totals as well. And this is a sample of an individual semi-annual certification. So this would be for one employee that worked 100% of their time on a specific cost objective. And it includes the certification statement, as well as a place for the employee's signature, their printed name, as well as their date, and then also a space for the signature of the supervisor or approving agency official signature and date. And this is a sample of a blanket semi-annual certification. And this actually includes, it's actually completed for a 6-month period, and it lists all of the employees that worked on one specific federal cost objective, includes their names, their titles, and then it has a space at the bottom for the signature and date for the supervisor or person with firsthand knowledge of the work performed. Now we're going to talk about employee benefits. The documentation that is required for employee benefits includes the payroll registers, copies of tax forms, invoices from insurance providers, support for allocation, meaning the written methodology and procedures for how the entity charges benefits to state and federal programs, if applicable. Next, we're going to talk about purchase services. As you know, within purchase services, there are 2 subcategories: contractual services as well as travel. For contractual services, a contractual agreement or terms of service are required to be maintained, as well as invoices and timesheets. For travel, the documentation could include documentation for lodging, mileage, meals, registration, and transportation. And next, we'll talk about supplies and materials, as well as the documentation that is required. Documentation for supplies and materials includes copies of invoices or purchase receipts, purchase orders or receiving documentation, as well as packing slips if applicable, and copies of appropriate checks to support payment. The SCDE assurances and terms and conditions for federal awards is actually an agreement between the SCDE and the subrecipient that states that the applicant will adhere to certain conditions as a subrecipient of federal funds passed through the SCDE. We want to remind you to communicate with your federal program managers to ensure that you receive a copy of the signed assurances and terms and conditions. And we also want to remind you that the grantee shall retain federal grant records, including financial records and supporting documentation for a minimum of 6 years after the end date of the grant when the final expenditure report claim for reimbursement and all final reports have been submitted unless informed otherwise or in the case of litigation. And now Brittany will talk to you concerning the procurement requirements.
All right, so for procurement requirements, we did want to show you that you can find all the procurement requirements in detail in 2 CFR 200.318 through 327. But just to highlight, you must have and use documented procedures. You must maintain oversight over your contractors. You must maintain written standards of standard of conduct covering conflicts of interest, which should include your disciplinary action for any violations, as well as award contracts to only responsible contractors possessing the ability to perform successfully. Some additional requirements is you must ensure all procurement transactions provide for full and open competition, and this includes the acquisition of property or services. You also must ensure non-competitive procurements are only awarded if one or more of the following circumstances apply. And those circumstances are listed below, but I will go ahead and highlight on a few of them. The acquisition of property or services does not meet the micro purchase or the small threshold or small purchase threshold. Sole source, emergency, and federal awarding agencies or pass-through entity authorizes it in writing, and after solicitation of a number of sources, and it was deemed that the competition is determined inadequate. We also must maintain records sufficient to detail the history of procurement, which means we need to include rationale for the method of procurement, selection of contract type, contractor selection or rejection, and the basis for the contract price. During our review, we did note some issues with procurement, some of those being not following documented procurement procedures, missing or no records to support procurement, which could be no documentation for solicitation, not having quotes or bids, no documentation, no written justification for sole source or emergency procurements. Those have to be justified. No written contract for procurements. Sole source procurements should have a written contract. It's also important to make sure that emergency procurement does meet the definition of an emergency per the district policy. We have run into instances where districts try to say that remodeling a wing of the high school was considered an emergency, and that is not. So just to make sure we're following what an emergency actually is. Some additional issues were no written contract administration procedures, no written standards for conflicts of interest and/or the disciplinary actions for those violations, missing contract provisions, which we will talk about here in a few minutes, no documented processes for determining if the vendor has been suspended or debarred, no written purchasing card policies, and existing unrelated purchase orders used to make purchases. So to roll into those contract provisions, you can find those contract provisions listed in Appendix 2 to Part 200. And basically all contracts made by the LEA under the federal award must contain the provisions listed in Appendix 2 to Part 200 when applicable. And we will highlight on those, but you can find that full list on the link on the slide. So to go into those contract provisions, contracts for more than one specified or simplified acquisition threshold, termination for cause and for convenience, equal employment opportunity, the Davis-Bacon Act and the Copeland Anti-Kickback Act, Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act, the right to inventions made under a contract or agreement, the Clean Air Act and the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, debarment and suspension, the Byrd Anti-Lobbying Amendment, recovered materials, prohibition of certain telecommunications and video surveillance services and equipment, domestic preferences for procurement. We want to talk also about debarment and suspension. So a contract award must not be made to parties listed on the government-wide exclusions in the System for Award Management, or SAM, in accordance with the OMB guidelines at 2 CFR 180 that implement Executive Orders 12549 and 12689. So we mentioned SAM. So this is sam.gov, and we just included a snippet of the front page of the website. But this is where you would go to check for federal debarment and suspension status. And this website is the State Fiscal Accountability Authority Division of Procurement Services website. And this is where you would go to check for state debarment and suspension status. Next, we're going to move on to the asset listing requirements. Per 2 CFR 200-313D1, property records must be maintained that include a description of the property, a serial number, the source of funding for the property, including the FAIN, who holds the title, the acquisition date, the cost of the property, the percentage of federal participation in the project cost of the federal award under which the property was acquired, the location, the use and condition of the property, and any ultimate disposition data, including the date of disposal and the sale of the property. During our reviews, we did note that some districts did not have a complete asset listing. Some of the common things that would be missing from that asset listing would be the FAIN, the source of funding, the acquisition date, the disposal date, and the sale price of any property sold. We did want to include an example of what a complete asset listing looks like. Again, if you need to see these, we are able to provide a better quality copy. I know it can be hard to read on the PowerPoint slide, but you can see that at least I hope you can see, that the asset listing provided has all the required components that a complete asset listing should have. Next, we'll move on to period of availability. So per 2 CFR 200-403H, cost must be incurred during the approved budget period, as well as per the federal assurances and terms and conditions, Part G, obligation of grant funds. Funds may not be obligated prior to the effective date or subsequent to the end or termination date for the grant period. No obligations are allowed after the end of the grant period. So some of the issues that we noted with period availability was some districts submitted supporting documentation for expenditures that were outside of the period of availability. And so an example is a district claimed expenditures incurred prior to the March 13, 2020 date. Therefore, those expenditures would be unallowed because of it occurring before the March 13th date. Another issue we noted was an expenditure claimed for a prior fiscal year was submitted for reimbursement in the subsequent fiscal year. So meaning the expenditure claimed for Q4 of fiscal year 2019-2020 submitted in GAPS as Q1 expenditure claim in fiscal year 2020-2021. It's important to be sure that we only request reimbursement for expenditures incurred during the period of availability. The period of availability is noted on the grant award notice. So we do want to give time to give questions if anybody should have any. But we also want to give you guys our contact information should you have any questions after we are finished presenting, or if you would like us to provide you with any of the samples that we mentioned that we can send over. This is my contact information as well as Peggy's contact information. We've also provided Melissa Myers, who is our director, and Hershula Davis, who is our audits manager's contact information. And we also want to give a shout out to the rest of our group. So if you have any questions, everyone else is able to help you as well. So did we have any questions? If not, then that is all we have. And again, please feel free to contact us if you think of anything at a later point.
I am so sorry. I thought I was unmuted. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
It said, the first one says, when you get a chance on slide 29, I'm a little confused regarding having to provide tax forms and invoices from insurance providers. Are you saying we'll need to have W-2 forms readily available for anyone funded with ESSER dollars?
Let us move over to 29. So we
And then
can
they had a
see.
second question, but I'll let you get through that one first.
Okay, so as it relates to copies of tax, we're meaning there is like some individuals, or excuse me, some times the FICA tax is actually being charged to the ESSER grants. So we would want not tax forms, but to know like what that percentage of FICA is that you're charging. So that's what we're saying when we say tax forms, but not W-2s.
Okay.
So if you're doing
They
like
also
FICA,
said,
okay.
oh, sorry. They said also, are you saying we'll need to have copies? Okay, I'll add that to it. We'll have to have copies of all our payroll vendors for any of those employees that have insurance benefits. Yeah, that was the end of that.
Yes,
question.
if they're right, yes, if the employee benefit, if that benefit is being charged to an ESSER grant, then yes, we would want to see documentation for that. If it's
Okay.
being charged to the ESSER grant, then, or a federal objective, then we definitely need to see the documentation. We'll want to be able to substantiate the amount that you've included on your claim.
Okay, so they added to that what tax forms would indicate FICA. Would the check stub suffice for payroll documentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. There were a couple others.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on the dollar limit for asset inventory?
The dollar limit.
That's
Normally,
what I'm thinking of.
Well, I guess I need further clarification as to what do you mean by dollar, like the amount that it cost? Like when they purchased it, like what does that mean?
That's how I interpreted it. Assets over $100 need to be inventoried. Yes.
Okay, so
that is true for us.
Okay, so then anything that would be purchased with the ESSER funds, they need to be included on that. So we can verify when we're looking at it that it's everything purchased, because we're going to be able to tie it back to all the expenditures claim that we need to be able to see that it's listed.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Let's see, there was also, I was hoping to get more elaborate information regarding asset tracking and purchasing thresholds. And someone else mentioned a capitalization threshold.
Those actually established by the district.
Let us verify that with Melissa. If you could, are you able to email us those questions or send those over to us separately
Yes,
so we
ma'am.
can follow up with her and be able to provide that back to the whoever's asking the question? Because we just want to get clarification before we say information that may or may not pertain to to what the question is.
Okay, yes, I can do that for you. Let's see. Okay. Also, Jay, if you could type in your email or send it to SCSer, that might be the best bet. Because right now it just says your first name and I'm gonna have a hard time looking you up. Let's see. And then we have a couple more that have been coming in. As far as the tax forms, they just want for clarification, all we need to provide is copies of the employee's payroll check stub that shows the wages and benefits deducted.
So I
that-
will say occasionally we will, so occasionally the tax, or excuse me, the pay register, we will request a pay register. So if we actually embark upon an audit of your agency or your entity, we'll be in contact with you to obtain the correct or the accurate documentation that we need. So occasionally the pay registers or the pay stubs are enough, but occasionally we do have to ask for, follow-up questions for additional documentation. But we'll be in contact with you. It's documentation that you maintain. So we'll definitely, you won't be required to create anything out of the ordinary. It's definitely documentation that you'll already have on hand. And we, just will either reach out to you, we'll either call you or send you an email to request that documentation if we need clarification on those expenditures. I hope that answers your question, but if not, please let me know.
Okay. So just to be clear, it looks like we have quite a few people who just want more information regarding inventory and asset tracking to be posted later. So I will make a note of that.
Okay.
Let's see, we still had a couple more questions. Just give me a moment if you would.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. This one kind of has to do with that. This one said for asset documentation, does the asset have to be fixed for over 5,000?
So when we're looking at the asset listings, we're looking at anything that the entity would have purchased using the ESSER funds. I have seen on my asset listings provided by some districts, put everything on there. Some go off of just their fixed assets. I have seen districts put air purifiers on there. The purpose of it is for us to make sure that the asset listings are containing all of the required elements, as well as making sure that things that we're seeing that would have been purchased with ESSER funds are included on those asset listings. So that's kind of what we're looking for when we're looking at the asset listings during our review.
And then it looks like, other than people asking to post later, that we have a couple more. What are the required elements in the asset listings?
But we actually posted that on one of the slides here, and I can go back to it.
Thank you.
No problem. So those asset listing requirements, they can be found in 2 CFR 200-313 D1, but it's everything that we or I read off below. So the description of the property, serial number, source of funding, who holds the title, the acquisition date, the cost of the property, the percentage of federal participation, the location, the use and condition, and any date for disposal and the sale of the property. So that is the requirement in 2 CFR 200-313, and that's what we are expecting to see when we look at the asset listings provided by the district or the entity.
Thank you. And then I believe just two more, 2 or 3 more, sorry. Can obligated funds be paid after the closeout date as long as they are paid within 1 or 2 weeks?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Sure. And I believe this is more of a, I could be wrong. So Miss Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's more of an obligation liquidation kind of question. And if that's the case, then as long as they are obligated, that is fine. The liquidation is later. So if they're paid within 1 to 2 weeks, I believe that's fine. Someone on my team, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I believe that is the case. Let's see what else was there. I had quite a few all come in at the same time, so I do apologize. Okay. That's been answered. Okay. What documentation should the LEA keep regarding contractors, like progress payments?
You need your quotes. You would need your purchase orders. I mean, anything that would go into the actual contract, we would need to see if I'm understanding your, I mean, your what, I mean, am I understanding the question correctly?
Hopefully. Contractors' time and effort.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the question?
It just says, I'm guessing, do they need time and effort? for
Oh, okay, so
contractors?
you're talking about time and effort, okay. For contractors?
Yes.
Am I understanding? Time and
Yes.
effort for contractors? No, we would not need any documentation on the paying of the contractors.
They would not need a pause.
Yeah, they wouldn't need a PAR or a timesheet or anything like that. If they're a contracted entity with the district or the other entity, then they'd be getting paid through the ESSER funds, but they're not employees getting direct reimbursement through like their checks with ESSER funds, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Okay.
I mean, they would need like a timesheet, but they wouldn't need like a PAR, yeah, certification.
All right. For contractors, do they also need to keep materials, supplies, documents for their work that was billed to them?
Yes.
All right. Let's see next. And I don't think, all right. Community partners, like for events, is a sign-in sheet acceptable for community partners event staff?
That is something I would have to ask Melissa about. That is nothing that I can say that I've ever ran into in my reviews. So if that's one of those questions that you could send over that I could, with as well as their contact information, I can ask Melissa and get back to them.
Okay, I can do that as well. Okay. Let's see. All right. For the asset listing, if an item costs less than $5,000, do we need to include it on the listing? Or if the item costs more than 100, should they be included?
It's a physical asset. Physical asset.
Oh, are we on the thing? Okay. So for the fiscal asset listing, yes, if it's between the $100 mark and the $5,000 mark, it would need to be included on that fiscal asset listing.
Okay.
It's like your computers, your laptops, your air purifiers, your, you know, if you have like the rolling carts that hold laptops, like anything that would have been purchased, you know, that would need to be included on your 1 year, in a 1 year time.
Okay.
Because asset inventory should be being done at least once a year. So that answers the question.
Okay. And then I think you may have answered this as well while you were speaking, but just in case, I believe this is the last one. If I missed one, I'm so sorry. We will try and get all these out to you. But someone said the majority of districts have a capitalization threshold of $5,000. Is the requirement for districts to maintain asset inventory for items under 5,000?
Yes.
Okay. All right. See, I'll double check, but I think that was everything. I know I threw a lot of questions at you just now, and you did beautifully responding to them.
Yes.
I will get some of these that you asked for follow-up. I will send them to you. And I know a few people were asking for input to be sent out. And more information to be sent out. So we will also be working on that, try and get that to you in the most efficient way possible.
So just let us know if, like I said, just send those over to us, those ones that we weren't able to answer. So like I said, we just want to make sure we get the most accurate information out to everybody. And if anyone thinks of anything after the fact, again, all of our contact information, including Melissa and Hershula's, will be on those slides, and you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And if the districts or any of the entities need to have any further clarification or want any additional information, we can definitely see about getting that stuff out to you guys.